Make sure to check out my Covey account, link down in the description. And check out my other series, Modern Classics and TV Treasures.
Watch yourself, don't fall off of the shelf.
You must be the new voice in town.
What's that sound? Is someone moving round? Sit down for a spell. You don't look so well.
Wait a minute, I feel great. You just leave yourself to fate. You might as well just hang around.
It's too late, we've got to operate. Just try to relax. It's the house of wax. Oh, I remember Frankenstein. Shivers up my spine. Wow.
I'm for getting out of here.
We'll go to the cellar down below. Trouble is a bubbling in the brew. And while you're down there, Mr. Vincent Price will give you good advice. He'll know what to do. You just tell him boo. He will put the photo in the store, I'm telling you. It's like a movie. It's a big movie show.
Hello, boys and ghouls, and welcome to the final installment of Scaretober. Today, we're going out with a bang. I am going to review Bride of Frankenstein. So, let's get started. Already reviewed the original Frankenstein. So if you haven't seen that review, please check it out by clicking the link in the description. Trust me, there will be plenty of stuff from that review that I will be covering in this review. Mary Shelley tells the story about how after the windmill was burned, Dr. Frankenstein was goaded into playing God again.
No, you maniac! What are you doing? Only a fool would play God!
By making a bride for his monster, Frankenstein, or as I like to call him, Frankie Boy. So, what are my thoughts on Bride of Frankenstein? Well, I can frankly say that it is a doggone masterpiece that is just as good, if not better, than the original. This movie came about because of the original book. You see, in the original book, Dr. Frankenstein does create a bride for his monster, but ultimately decides not to go through with it. And that's why the first movie has Dr. Frankenstein survive the windmill burning so that the film could be open for a sequel. But director James Whale didn't want to make a sequel, feeling that they were drawing an idea. He actively avoided having to make the sequel by directing films like The Old Dark House and The Black Cat. And Kurt Newman was set to take his place. Kurt Newman would later go on to direct the 1958 Fly. But after the runaway success that was The Invisible Man, studio head / producer Carl Laemmle Jr. was convinced that only James Whale could direct the film. So James Whale was finally convinced to do it if he was allowed to direct the film One More River. Several titles floating around, including The New Adventures of Frankenstein, The Monster Lives, which sounds like the name of a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. James Whale was convinced that the sequel would never be as good as the original, and boy, could he not have been more wrong, as the sequel was not only a critical darling, a box office darling, but it's also seen as pretty much one of the greatest sequels of all time. Just as good, if not better, than the original. The music for Bride of Frankenstein was done by Franz Waxman, who also did music for Sunset Boulevard, as well as Alfred Hitchcock films like Rebecca and Rear Window, as well as Captain Courageous. And the music he does for this movie is absolute perfection. It has a very gothic feel, which helps with the movie's atmosphere. One of my favorites is probably the intro. Another bit of music I like is the music that plays in the opening scene. It has a very classical music feel. Another good one is when the monster, aka Frankie, first appears. It has a very creepy yet hypnotizing feel to it. Another good one is Dr. Pretorius's intro. If him alone isn't enough to convince you he's bad news, then the music most certainly will. Probably the best bit of music from this movie is the bride's theme. It's so beautiful and haunting, with also a great use of bells. The opening scene is actually with Mary Shelley, of all things, played by Elsa Lanchester, who looks absolutely nothing like the real Mary Shelley, but I digress. Gotta say, I'm glad that this movie is finally giving Mary Shelley the respect she deserves, not just in this scene, but also in the credits. It especially makes up for the sexist bullcrap that they did in the last movie by having her credit be Mrs. Percy Shelley, which was the name of her husband. None of that malarkey here. She is front and center in this opening scene. Anyways, we get a recap of the first movie. Kind of like how the Rocky movies open with a recap of scenes from the previous installment. Afterwards, Mary Shelley tells the rest of her story, even though this is not how her story goes. We cut back to the windmill burning at the end of the first movie, and we see that the father who lost his daughter is hungry for Frankie's blood, and Frankie reappears and gives him the same treatment that his daughter got. But because this was 1935, we could not show that. And while Frankie Boy is killing him, we get a shot of an owl. And Frankie Boy reemerges and kills the wife and scares the crap out of Una O'Connor. Yes, the innkeeper from The Invisible Man. Thankfully, she is not as annoying as in that film, and she has a bigger role. Yay! She tries to tell everybody that Frankie is still alive, but surprise, surprise, nobody believes her. Then comes Dr. Pretorius doing his best Judge Doom cosplay. And he is glorious!
Gruesome, unthinkable, stinkable, horrible, hooray! We are victorious, victorious.
All joking aside, Dr. Pretorius, played by Ernest Thesiger, is the MVP of this movie. He is such a wicked bastard. Everything he does and says has so much flair to it and so much charisma. He is so over the top and can be seen as a reverse of Dr. Waldman from the first movie, who was basically the angel on Dr. Frankenstein's shoulder and was boring and pretty bland. Dr. Pretorius is the opposite of that. He is the devil on Dr. Frankenstein's shoulder, and he is also very different ways of conducting his experiments. Whereas Dr. Frankenstein took bodies from graves and stitched them up, he has homunculi. Oh, not that kind of homunculi. Not the kind of homunculi from anime. It ain't no sexy gods. Get out of here. Go upstairs and get the candy. Basically, artificial tiny people, which he keeps in jars and dresses them up as if they were Barbie dolls. And one of them is a mermaid. The effects to bring the homunculi to life still hold up really well. They filmed the actors in large-scale jars and composite their image on the actual jars which were on the set. All of this was added during post-production. While this weird science is happening, we cut back to Frankie. As I stated in my review, Frankenstein is more terrified of the people around him than they are of him. Can't help but feel sorry for Frankie Boy when he gets nothing but trouble just for existing, like him getting crucified and chained up at the same time. The dude just wants to find a place where he belongs. And while he's running in the forest, he stumbles upon someone who can see him for his true self. And oddly enough, the man is blind. And it's a match made in heaven. And they give each other exactly what both of them need: companionship. There's a pretty wholesome scene where he's teaching the monster etiquette as well as how to speak, and the difference between good and bad. Was a lot of controversy over the fact that the monster spoke, particularly from Boris Karloff, who objected to the idea, thinking that it would rob the creature of its charm. I guess that's for each viewer to decide. These two could have been happy together if it weren't for two blockhead hunters who pretty much ruin it. Now let's talk about the main attraction of this film, the title character, the bride, who when she first appears, she looks more like a female mummy. Well, at least it's better than the female mummy in Mummy 2017. Well, we finally get a good look at her, and wow, did they nail her. Only appears towards the end of the film, but boy does she make an everlasting impact. Her design has become iconic. Jack Pierce based her hair on the crown of Nefertiti. Her dress is absolutely beautiful. It looks like it could have come off the runway in Paris. I have some problems with this movie, some big and some small. The small ones are outside of maybe some weird Dutch angles that give me Battlefield Earth vibes. You have Frankenstein's wife by Valerie Hobson taking Mae Clark's place. I don't know if you can tell, but these two look absolutely nothing alike. They had to recast because Mae Clark was sick. But come on, Universal. You couldn't have dyed her hair blonde or given her a wig or something? I mean, you did this better with The Mummy 3. And another problem I have is, why does the mayor look nothing like he did in the first movie? And then there's Carl. Carl is pretty much Fritz from the first movie if you literally made him a murderer and got rid of his hunchback. They really did nothing to make this a different character. And him playing by Dwight Fry doesn't really help none. And the fact that Carl gets killed by Frankenstein. Gee whiz. I mean, outside of the Invisible Man, Dwight Fry can't catch a break, can he? First he gets killed in Dracula, then he gets killed in the first Frankenstein movie, and now this. You might as well give him a red Star Trek shirt, given how many times he dies in a Universal film. But of course, the biggest problem is that the Hays Code had to put their nose in where it didn't belong. A lot of Frankenstein's kills had to be censored, as stated earlier, but there were a lot of blasphemous scenes that had to be cut because of the Hays Code. Like Dr. Pretorius calling Bible stories as fairy tales had to be replaced with this line.
And follow the lead of nature, or of God, if you like your Bible stories.
And Frankenstein was supposed to take down a cross thinking that someone was tied up to it. But Frankenstein had to instead push a statue down. This movie is not just a horror movie. It is so much more than that. And I highly recommend it. 5 gold stars. Well, that's pretty much all I have to say about The Bride of Frankenstein. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to go upstairs and go give candy to the trick-or-treaters. Until the next review, I'm Henry R. Mockingbird, your host with the mustache, signing off.
It's weird.
It's much worse than I feared. I'll close my eyes and make it disappear.
This is strange. It ain't home on the range.
You just tell St. Pete that you got cold feet. Here goes the sun, here comes the night. Somebody turn on the light. Somebody tell me that fate has been